Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fact Checks podcast. Today we have a special guest, and his name is Tristan Workmeister. He is social media video reporter at Reuters and very equally passionate as Haley and I are about media literacy, social media storytelling, and all things digital news transformation. So today we're going to talk a lot about Australia's recent social media ban and the updates that have happened with that, and I guess what that means for the future of media literacy, education, and news consumption and engagement. And so before we get into that, I'll let Tristan do a little bit of an intro about himself, and then we can dive right in.
Hi, I'm Tristan. I work for Reuters, as you said. I'm the first person in my role, which doesn't mean that Reuters hasn't been doing vertical video for a while. They have, but it means that vertical video is a higher priority for the agency. And all of Reuters recognizes that news habits are changing and that platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts are more and more the gateway to longer form journalism. And so we're trying to meet audiences where they are. It's as simple as that. So yeah, my job is essentially to make sure that if anyone on any of those platforms follows just one news account, they get a good understanding of what's happening in the world. And we try to cover every day the top 5 stories globally and make sure that we update our followers as these stories develop. I also guest lecture a little bit on the side, and I teach around like social media storytelling, analytics on those platforms, and a little bit around investigations and open source intelligence. So I'm really passionate about making sure that people know about the media and know how journalism is made, because I think it's making us all better citizens.
Yeah, well, that is perfect for us, especially we're kind of navigating this space of media literacy for young people. And yeah, meeting them where they are is such a good way to put it because, yeah, social media is so relevant now in terms of news. And that is a good segue into the topic for this episode. Me being Australian, I've been following really closely with the social media ban in Australia for under 16-year-olds. So the Australian government announced, honestly, a while ago about the ban, but it's set to take hold on December 10th. And it's actually, there's been a few social media platforms already start to take away accounts, but this is going to affect, all Australian children under 16 that have accounts with platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, YouTube. So the main ones. There is some that aren't included, I think Discord and stuff like that. But yeah, so we're already seeing this start to happen in Australia. And it's a really big topic, not just in Australia, but around the world. The world is watching how this is going to take hold in Australia. Because I know that the European Union is looking to implement something similar. Denmark and Malaysia have both said that they're going to do similar type of bans. So yeah, but it's so new as well. And Australia is really going to be this kind of this tester for it, I guess. And we have really no idea how it's going to affect young people, really. I think there hasn't been too much research. So it is going to be really interesting. It is like a fishbowl for the rest of the world. But yeah, there's a lot of different opinions about it. There's a lot of debate. So, I mean, the Australian government said it was kind of made to limit pressures and risks that come with extended social media use, but also kind of when young people are exposed to targeted ads, but also exposed to harmful content. So there is like multiple different angles you could look into this.
I can ping in with a question. Tristan, I'm curious, given that you're passionate about, meeting this audience where they are, helping people understand where journalism is coming from, where news is coming from, how they can engage with it. What do you think, or how do you think this is going to impact their news consumption, under 16-year-olds? Is that going to go back into, the responsibility of the home, the responsibility of the parents? Like if they're not, because we talk a lot about how this age demographic isn't really going on to CNN or CNBC every morning to check their news and get informed. Like they're going to scroll on TikTok. So if they're not on social media, then how are they going to consume their news?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And as Haley said, it's super hard to predict, right? We can only make assumptions. So this is not grounded in any research, but we can only assume that news consumption is going to shift to more informal and more siloed spaces. I'm thinking like WhatsApp groups or public feeds on those platforms where they'd potentially share articles or videos that would circulate like chains. Like it's almost taking us back to, I think, more like the age of our parents with their first phones and having those SMS and email chains that they'd forward to each other of like, oh, do you know about this thing? And do you know about that? Maybe that's what we could see coming to that demographic in Australia because of the ban. And I think it's really hard because obviously I fully understand the purpose of the law, and there are definitely loads of issues with those platforms, but we do have to ask whether the law will make it even harder for young people to be informed and to find information that's relevant to them. We can't underestimate the power of community of social media, and a lot of teenagers are bound to be in a phase where they do need to find a sense of belonging. They need to relate to other people, and that's just part of growing up. Using platforms where that community group feel is not as native brings some issues, I think. So we need to think in terms of news consumption where that's going to take them. The answer is quite unclear, but I don't think that teenagers, like you said, are opening a newspaper. Definitely not. Younger generations are not like turning on like a morning TV show. They're most likely maybe to open a news app on their phone. They're maybe more likely to listen to a podcast about the news. But then where do you take the conversations about the news? Even if you're able to receive that information, then where do you plug into the wider conversation that's happening around the news? Like news is about obviously facts, but it's also about how it's affecting people, and people inherently have different views about that. We can obviously implement regulations around how views are expressed around the social platforms, and we can implement guardrails to make them a safer place for everyone. But access to information is the priority for this age group. So it's not quite a full answer to your question, but I think no one can really know at this moment how it's going to impact Australian teenagers. But it is a bit concerning to me personally. If I were in the shoes of an Australian teenager, to think, how do I get the news now? Would they open an app to listen to it and make that conscious effort? Maybe not. There are so many more barriers to accessing the news if it's not where they spend most of their time. That needs to be factored in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And to your point, I don't think there is one answer to it. So it was definitely an open-ended question. But we've been talking about it loads as well in terms of if you're going to ban something that, so many people are using and so many people are used to using, there also needs to be that education element to it. So how much more then is going to follow in terms of being in schools and communicating with parents and, yeah, encouraging those healthy conversations that do come with consuming the information that we have. And I think that's something that we talk about a lot as well, is how can we consume all of this? And we are kind of like in this social media age of fatigue and consumption. Like we're constantly on social media, we're consuming so much stuff. And I consciously have to make an effort myself to just like put my phone down and then call Haley or call someone and talk about what I just saw, because that does then spark analysis and critical thinking and things like that. And so, yeah, perhaps what, this demographic growing up on social media, maybe they don't have that yet, but I think with a ban of any sort, there should always be an education element that follows. And I just don't think we've seen too much of that. So I think it'll be very interesting to see how that unfolds in the future.
Yeah, and I think one thing that does bother me with all these different governments, all these different organizations talking about limiting access, which I understand is, there's these issues with social media, is that we're not actually including young people in these conversations. And it's about their future, it's about them, but they're not even getting a voice in this conversation. And I mean, I saw yesterday, a couple of days ago, there's a campaign group in Australia called Digital Freedom Project that have launched legal proceedings in the High Court of Australia to try and block the law from coming through. And it's the two plaintiffs are two 15-year-olds, which I think is really interesting. So, there is some pushback from the teens. I mean, I know that there has been some media reports on ABC as well and SBS about, there are teens that are open to this ban. They know that this is a good way to connect more with nature, maybe regulate, their nervous systems a little bit. I think overall, in terms of policy, we're not really including young people in these conversations enough.
We need to understand the scale of this problem. We don't have statistics for under 18s. However, for the younger side, we do have data for. We know that across markets, and that's from the Reuters Institute a digital report from 2025, younger audiences are the most dependent on social and video networks for news. That's 44% for 18 to 24-year-olds and 38% for 25 to 34-year-olds, saying that it's their main source of information. So we're effectively cutting off those people from that access, which is quite considerable. And we also know that younger groups, but obviously not a scoop, but we also know that younger groups are not the most likely to make the conscious decisions to visit a news website. So again, going back to meeting audiences where they are, younger people, but not only younger people, are most likely to be on social media. Therefore, news needs to be on social media if news outlets want to fulfill their mission of informing people. It's as simple as that. And in Australia, Facebook is the most used for news as a social media platform. It's nearly 40% of its users that use it for news. YouTube is second, Instagram third, and TikTok is fifth, which, again, quite interesting to know all of that. Most importantly, all of them are on the rise. Like, if you look at the evolution of it, all of them are increasing year after year in Australia. So it's not just that this snapshot now is looking like we're cutting away a big chunk of the audience, but it's also cutting a trend that was going in that direction anyway.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that Facebook tops the charts in Australia in that sense. I do ask Haley a lot, actually, why she's always using Facebook or to talk to her family back home on Facebook Messenger, because I'm like, I haven't used it in so long.
Same.
And it's funny because we were actually trying to make a Facebook community group the other day, and I felt like very out of touch with my Facebook capabilities. But yeah, I think there's an element of, well, obviously, I worry about when these kids turn 16 and then they're just given social media. How do they know how to navigate it? Like, are we then throwing them into the deep end of these like messy, messy waters that we can already see are becoming messier every day? Like, the algorithms are somewhat inspiring and then somewhat terrifying. And then we're just constantly online, some for good and social belonging, some for bad. But yeah, I think it's just, how do we adjust someone to that? Like, it's like we were talking about financial literacy and trying to kind of tie this into the whole subject earlier. But, it's like not teaching anybody about money. And then they turn 18 and you're like, okay, go off to college and you're on your own now. Learn how to budget, learn how to manage your finances. And then they're like, wait, what? Because we have, as parents, as schools, like, we're supposed to have this responsibility to equip young people with the skills they need to navigate everyday life. And social media has now become one of those currencies, one of those things that we do use every day. And then on the media organization side of things, I think there's a lot of, opportunity for my startup brain, so startups in this space, about how is there going to be new news apps? Is there going to be new things that like can have young people on them to engage with this information landscape? And yeah, and how do bigger media organizations that hold this trust and reputation still now adapt to meeting this audience? Because they can't just let the younger audience in Australia just lose sight of what they're putting out. So I think it'll be really fascinating to kind of see where that goes. Haley, I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about just like opening up, this whole social media landscape to when you turn 16. It's also, yeah, you're going to have 2 years in Australia before you can start to vote. Or you have to vote in Australia. It's compulsory to vote when you're 18. So you've given that a window of 2 years to be surrounded by this incredibly overwhelming environment of just content, media, opinions, everything. And I think that, yeah, I think that that's a big thing to take on if you haven't got any sort of media literacy support with you. So I do worry about how that's going to look. And I think, a big part of this conversation is, do we bring media literacy to schools now? Like in Australia, is this something we should actually put in the curriculum? Because yeah, there is going to be and I think it's fair to say there's going to be a bit of a gap here now. There's going to be a big black hole in terms of where people get their news from. And I think, yeah, and the trust aspect of news organizations, how do we get young people to want to go on an app? That's a thing. You can have these, you can meet them where they are, but they still have to want to engage with the content. And that's where I think newsroom's going to have to get a little bit more creative, maybe. And Tristan, that's a good thing to ask for you. Like, how is Reuters kind of, what's the demographics like for social media? Like, are teens actually like engaging with Reuters content on TikToks?
Yeah, I'm not able to give you a full breakdown, but I can say that we definitely reach all age groups. And it's actually a big misconception, I think, that vertical video specifically and platforms like TikTok, Reels, and Shorts only attract really, really young people. It's not the case anymore. Every single age group that you survey year after year uses those platforms more and more. What's also interesting is that the same surveys tell us that the younger those users, the more likely they are to use the comment sections and the interactive features from those apps. Why? Because there's obviously a big concern that what you're watching is false, and misinformation remains at the forefront of everyone's mind. Nearly 6 in 10 people globally are worried about misinformation online. That's huge. But younger people are the ones who make the extra effort of checking that comment section and thinking, oh, is it AI? Is it true? Is it false? What's the consensus in the comment section, which can be quite helpful sometimes to distinguish between what's true or false, depending on what the algorithm is feeding you. And I think, to go back to your point, it's definitely something that comes from media literacy, media education as well, where not only do you need to teach younger people about how journalism is made, but also about opinion and bias, and how it's quite interesting to make the extra effort of checking, well, this is how this news organization covered this story. Well, let me search in like the TikTok search bar for the keywords of that story and see how another one has covered it, or what type of other content are they pushing for. It's that very simple step that a lot of people do already, but there will be a lot more barriers to that in a younger person's ecosystem, because those apps will be taken away from them. So yeah, it's hard to predict what it will be like for them, but we do have to emphasize that misinformation is out there, and taking away the apps entirely is unlikely to solve that problem altogether.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that comes to mind off the back of that is, well, one, I was just talking about the other day how we don't give young people enough credit for how naturally curious they are. Like, they're the ones that want to explore, they want to question things. They also want to argue heavily with their friends, with their parents, with their friends, like people on social media. And that is why they're in these comment sections. So where is that going to go to? I'm unsure. Like, where are they going to be able to channel that energy? Because it's all they've ever known is to do it on social media. But one of the other things is, as newsrooms and so many different industries start to transform over the next, like, even couple years, 5 years, 10 years, decades, I think social media and media literacy is such a critical skill that's going to be at the heart of everything, like not just journalism, but everything. And right now, this next generation is actually insanely, like, well equipped to be able to navigate how quickly jobs are changing, because they know this, like, media aspect. They know AI, they know technology. They're like, well, I don't want to do that the traditional way because I could do it this way, which are how jobs are changing. And even for you, being one of the first people as the social media reporter, that is now a role that exists that didn't, however, some time ago. And if we're not, and where kids are learning these skills right now is on their own. It's online, it's on TikTok. They're learning how to edit videos really quickly. They're learning how to put reels up on their Instagram. And if you're not learning that through that way until you're 16, then are you now equipping yourself for the future of where you're actually even going to work? I mean, it's something that just came up in my head as we spoke about it, but it's fascinating. So there must be something else then now that is going to teach people's social media skills because it's going to be so pivotal in everyone's career and everyone's future. We might not have a generation that, you know, if everybody's like, let's say everybody worldwide gets banned for using social media under 16, yeah, we're now missing out on this generation that's actually like uniquely equipped to be able to navigate the future of how everything is changing.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, yeah, I think that's where you think about, like, there's some of the argument for the ban is, like, should you lower the age even more? Like, is 13 more appropriate? Because, I mean, it's when do we even consider teens to be kind of responsible for their own critical thinking, you know? It's a hard thing to judge. I mean, I think I was 13 when I got Facebook, and that was, like, when it was
I
legal,
thought
I
you were
think?
going to say you were 13 when you learned critical thinking. I was like, that's
Okay.
a very specific age to remember.
I remember
I developed
actually
my
when it
frontal
switched
lobe at
in.
the age of 13.
Yeah, I got a Facebook account when I was 13, and I think that's, like, legally when you can get one in Australia. I think worldwide maybe, yeah. And I remember I was, like, one of the last people to get Facebook because everyone had it before then. Yeah, I mean, I think 13 is kind of an appropriate age, I think. That's when you wanna start engaging with the world. That's when you wanna start learning about things like politics. I think that makes more sense. I think 16, I don't know, you're 16, you know, you can get a learner's permit, you know? You can start driving a car. I think in some countries you can even be tried as an adult. Like, it's crazy that that's what we're, like, that we're treating kids like that. I think it doesn't, for me, it doesn't
Yeah.
seem fair.
And I think it's interesting to have that blanket view on it as well, even because everybody's different. Families are different, upbringings are different. Like some people do develop critical thinking skills at the age of 13, maybe 8, I don't know, but you know, you never know.
Yeah.
Or at least start to, or get involved in it and get
Yeah.
curious. Like we just said, kids are inherently curious. And also, like we've talked about before, I do think kids are gonna buy this in a way. Like obviously with every ban, there's, you know, the risk of people still doing it anyway. But like as I remember when I got a Facebook and I think I wasn't old enough. So I was like, oh, I could just change the age. But it's just one of those things where, or even when I got Instagram, I was like, this is so weird. Why would anybody want to just post photos all the time? Like photos of what? Like, and it's just like, that's how quickly things change. That's how quickly like young people are on social media younger and younger now. But when we were, it wasn't the case. So yeah. And there's a lot of movements around that. And there's one in the US called Wait Till Eighth, like where all these parents collectively agree not to give their kids smartphones until 8th grade. But yeah, I really think education is going to be a really big part of it, whether that's from media itself, whether it's from parents, whether it's from schools, whether it's from us. But yeah, I don't know if that went anywhere with a question, but I saw Tristan nodding his head a little bit, so
Yeah, no, all very valid points. It's one of those things where lawmakers are addressing a real problem, but by addressing it, you don't know if the solution they've put forward will actually make things better. And we might be proven wrong, who knows? The platforms that are affected by this ban, all have their own issues, but because they are the biggest names out there, one, they are the ones targeted by the law, but two, they also are the ones, because of their public appeal, that have already put some safeguards of their own doing because of problems they've run into and public pressure. So you do have to wonder where you draw the line between regulating more heavily the platforms that already exist and how they function, rather than regulating access altogether. And that's where I think news comes in, where if you have reputable news organizations on your platform, could it be that you then regulate access to set of content, like you allow news, you allow posts from family and friends, but you tweak the algorithm so you subtract content from, say, influencers. I don't have an answer to this, and it's not me trying to do politics, but looking at it, I can't help but think that there is a middle ground that would actually make it easier to preserve young people's access to news and yet make it safer for them to use it. Because how would young people be able to tell the difference between what's true and false if it's just a link that's shared in a huge WhatsApp group, for example? It's much harder because there's no comment section, there's no quick shareability around that to quickly assess the trustworthiness of it. So yeah, I mean, we keep going back to it. It's hard to know what's going to happen, and I'm really, really curious to see how news habits will change on the younger end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, there's going to be like I was just talking the other day. I say that a lot. I've been talking a lot, but I was on a panel about the future of journalism, and one of the things that I kept bringing up was trust in this age is a double-edged sword. So it's no longer we can't just demand it from media, and media can't just expect audiences to, is all about healthy conversation. And I'm a very big proponent or believer that the future of media is going to transform into this like trusted community space where if instead of leaving it up to third-party apps, when are news organizations, media publications going to start transforming into allowing people to have those conversations within? I mean, we see it like them stemming out into events and certain things like that because they like to put their audience in a place together to communicate about what they're consuming. I think we all have that desire to do that. And also, because I'm cautious of time as well, but I do think that with anything like this, with any period of uncertainty where we cannot predict what is about to happen, there is always going to be room for opportunities. And I think at this point, there's opportunities for media publications, media organizations, there's opportunities for schools, there's opportunities for parents and innovators and people who want to make a difference in the future, step into this space, see it from a bigger picture point of view, and like, where can you start? How can you get people and young people engaged? How can you get them to be safe about it and having these healthy conversations? And so I believe if there's anything to take away from our back and forth, we have no idea what this is going to bring because we don't, that it will bring as many opportunities as there are uncertainties. And that's my positive thinking mindset that always comes from it.
Yeah, and I mean, regardless of how this kind of looks in, a few months' time, I do think what's not going to change is that young people are extremely curious, and they're going to find this community somewhere online because they've grown up with it. That's what they used to. They're going to find it. So yeah, I guess in terms of safety, in terms of I guess misinformation, it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. But yeah, that sense of community that's not going away.
Yeah. And if anybody under 16 is watching this, go follow Tristan because I'm sure he does really cool stuff on social media for Reuters, but I haven't consumed any of it yet, so I'm going to admit to that. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything else to add, Tristan, but again, I'm cautious of time, so we don't want to keep you too long.
No, that's all right. I really liked your point about trust. It's definitely something, especially social media teams in any newsroom around the world is very aware of. It's newsroom brand names don't carry enough weight on social for people to just go, it's from X. Sorry, not X as in the social
Yeah,
platform,
yeah.
but it's from, need to be careful with that.
Insert name here.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we need to be careful. Brand names in 2025 don't carry enough weight on social media to, on their own, be credible to any follower. You can't assume that a follower just bumping into one of your videos on their For You page will just go, I'll follow because it's from this newsroom. The brand awareness of news is fairly low overall, I think, for most news brands. And so what we're working on really hard at Reuters is just establishing trust by being really open about how we report on stories and say, obviously front load with all the facts of a story and then say, actually, we want to deep dive on this point because we think it's important to link it to this and to that. We're open about how we choose story angles. Obviously, all of it is done without bias or anything, but we make sure in our language that we don't assume that people will trust us or will care just because we tell them to. And I think it's really important to be quite pedagogical with it. It's part of, it's in a way, it's a small element of media literacy that we do with our vertical video output. And we are keen also to show the behind the scenes of our reporting, showing our reporters on the ground, showing photographers, videographers. We show all of our teams and we show all of our reporters because we're not just in an office saying to the world, this is the story that matters most today. No, we're telling you about this story because we have this person on the ground telling you exactly what they're seeing who they're talking to, what it feels like to be there, how they got prepared to cover this story, and potentially how it's affected them as well. Because we can't forget that our journalists are also affected by the stories they cover. Um, so yeah, trust is definitely the cornerstone of journalism on social media, and we can't forget about it.
Yeah, and I really like how you mentioned all of that and about transparency as well. And I think I was trying to explain it to someone, but if I just met Haley or if I met you, Tristan, on a whim and you were like, you should really trust me with this, and then you gave me a piece of advice, I'd be like, why would I do that? Like, there's no reason for me to trust you. And I think that's how we develop relationships every day. We ask questions. We decide what their experience is. What are they doing? How did they come to that conclusion themselves? And then you put yourselves in those shoes. But with the way journalism and media is going as well, is there's also this massive rise of independent journalism and independent news and independent media. And people are starting to follow journalists for journalists because they feel like they've been so raw and transparent on social media that they feel like they have that trusted relationship with them. Like, he wouldn't screw me over because I've been following him since day one. And people, and maybe I don't know the statistics, but I'm just assuming a lot of people that have grown up on social media don't necessarily have that with traditional legacy media publications because they haven't had that relationship with them since they were 5. Um, People should not be on social media at age 5. I just mean in general. But yeah, it's fascinating. And I think rebuilding those relationships in the age of technology that we're in is really important. Like, we can't just assume that they're the same that they were 20, 30 years ago. So that was a really good point. I like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Is the journalist is the influencer now. I guess that's there's so many like traditional journalists too, like from CNN that I've seen that are making this pivot towards being their own brand, and that is it's also something that's appealing to young people. Is yeah, like you said, that feeling of trust that you gather from a long period of time.
For
Yeah.
sure. I'm seeing the industry moving more and more towards like a hub, a talent hub for newsfluencers where they turn their reporters into on-camera talent for their own stories. And instead of having social media teams that front the content reported by someone else, they have the person reporting it also doing the social media piece. Obviously, that takes a lot of upskilling, it takes time, it takes resources, but I see newsrooms acting more and more as the sort of original, like, Twitter blue tick of editorial backing. Like, this person is trustworthy because they are backed by this news organization. And I think we'll definitely see more and more, like, collaborations, cross-posting of content in whatever branding and features it takes on all of these apps in the future, because people follow people. They don't follow news organizations. Some of them do, thankfully,
Yeah.
but they crave relatability, they crave personality, they crave authenticity, and we need to show the more rugged side of news. And how do I prepare to cover this protest? What happens if I get arrested in this country where press freedom isn't really high? All those things, I think, are like the behind the scenes is just as important as the story itself, because people want to know how it got put in front of their eyes.
And on that note, I think we should just keep getting people excited about media and news and information. And that's kind of just where, yeah, we have to ride the wave as it happens and again turn those uncertainties into possibilities and potential, because I think it's out there. And I personally am always excited about where the future is taking us, even though it can be scary at sometimes.
Yeah.
But cool. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Tristan,
Yeah,
for
thank you so
joining
much.
us. We really
Thank you
enjoyed
for
it.
having me.
And yeah, we'll chat to you next time.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Bye.